Hello and welcome to Real World HR, the podcast which is putting the human back into HR. I'm Louise Kennedy, HR expert, chartered CIPD professional and founder of leading HR consultancy Oculus HR. In the Real World HR podcast, we focus on people. And of course, where there's people involved, there's sometimes problems. But we don't shy away from that. We tell the stories that we've learned from and explain the processes that have supported the solutions. This episode features talent acquisitions expert Sam Spoors. Award-winning entrepreneur Sam is the founder and strategic talent and resourcing director at Talentheads. Talentheads supports growing businesses as their internal recruitment team. They break in the traditional stereotypes of the recruitment industry by providing businesses with a better way to attract, nurture and retain talent. On this podcast, Sam will discuss what businesses can do to change the way that they view the recruitment strategies in a competitive market, the rise of employer branding, and also how to ensure your people align perfectly with organisations' cultures and values. Are you ready to step into the real world of HR? Thanks very much for joining us today, Sam. We are really interested to kind of talk about the recruitment topic. I think there's so much that goes with it, and there's such an area of things that, there's not enough people, is there, to be able to do the jobs at the moment. So I would imagine what it is that you're doing in businesses at the moment is even more difficult than what it would have been previously. So do you want to just start off and give us a little bit of an intro about kind of who you are and what you do and what Talentheads does as well? I know we've known each other. Someone asked us the other day, didn't they, and said, how do you know each other now? I thought, actually,
we can't remember how.
We just know each other. And probably for about 4 years, 5 years, if not a bit longer. Yeah. But we can't remember how we know each other.
No.
And we just do.
It just works.
It just works. So if you just want to kind of run through who you are and what it is that the business does and how you support other businesses, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I set up a business called Talentheads. So I'm the founder and the managing director of Talentheads. So I set it up in 2020 in the pandemic. I just knew there was a market there for it, and I was desperate to kind of come out of the corporate world and set something up myself. So basically my background previous to setting up Talentheads was I worked in recruitment agencies for 11 years. I did the usual, go to sixth form, do your A-levels, and then kind of do your degree after that. And once I graduated, I knew I wanted to work with people. So I actually went into social services. It was absolutely brilliant, a really, really good opportunity for me to see such a diverse range of people with lots of different issues. However, I realised quite quickly that actually I was quite green and quite naive, being quite young coming out of university, and I was a little bit worried that, when things happen to some of those individuals I was supporting in their independent living, that if anything was to happen, I didn't think emotionally I could deal with it. So literally walked into a recruitment agency and said, I want to register and see what opportunities you've got available for someone like me. And they said, you'd be perfect working here. And then 11 years later, I was still working in recruitment agencies. So I've worked in different recruitment agencies, national ones, international ones, boutique ones, high street ones, some really, really good businesses. And I've had exposure across recruiting every single type of individual in every sector that you possibly could. And then basically one of my clients came up to me and said, come and join us internally. We want you to come and work for us. And when my kids were at an age where I was kind of like, actually I can make a step and come out of something that I kind of know now. I've been in for a long time. I want to join something new. Now's the right opportunity for my family. I actually went in and became the head of recruitment for a very large national business with multi-sites across the UK. And I led a team to manage the full recruitment spectrum from absolutely everything, future talent programs up to board level appointments. And I grew a really big team as that business went through mergers, acquisitions, financial buyouts, lots of things like that. And I set up Talentheads because I knew that there was a market there for something external that wasn't a traditional recruitment agency. And being an internal professional, I knew what it felt like and the sting that it felt when a hiring manager said to me they were going to use a recruitment agency. And I was like, why don't you want to use my team? My team are fabulous. And I thought, actually, there's got to be something different out there that bridges the internal model with the external model. And you can outsource your recruitment to us and we would bring it back in-house. So it's owned longer term and strategically by the business.
So do you think your main driver initially of setting up Talentheads was that experience that you'd had internal?
Absolutely.
So you were able to kind of, it sounds like you had a real breadth of experience as you went through.
I did. And I don't think, because I hadn't, obviously being new to the internal world of recruitment, I hadn't seen the impact that people actually made. I mean, traditional recruitment agencies are all about kind of sourcing talent, finding CVs, send them over to clients, arranging interviews and then appointing. But actually, when you go in and work internally as the internal external recruitment team, you see the pain of the gap that's been there for ages, that the business can't move on because they haven't got the individual there to be able to do the role. You know, you see the progression of individuals you put in there. You find out kind of how your recruitment strategy ties into your people strategy, that ties into your business strategy. It's just so much more detailed than the external world.
And I think people just come up with that external, or it's a recruitment agency, they'll find somebody. But actually, for me and you both, I think we're kind of quite aligned in the fact that actually it's that culture and values piece, isn't it, that joins together from what's being put out there as your recruitment, as in who are you as a business recruitment, and then bringing it in, but having that level of consistency being brought in, isn't it, just to be able to say, well, actually, it's not just what we promote out there to the wider public. It's kind of as you bring people in-house, what do you then do to make sure that that's all in place, isn't it, to be able to keep the people, really, isn't it? The retention element of it's so important as well as the recruitment, because people are changing jobs so quickly, the turnover's so quick. And I think people are average, you know better than me, but 2 or 3 years, people are in jobs, then they move to something like for like as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about recruitment to retention. It's got to be about retention. That kind of bums on seat, that plaster kind of effect of there's pain, we need to recruit transactionally, just doesn't work. And I think you're absolutely right. It has to be about the longer term plan. You know, what do we want to stand for as a business? What benefits do we need to be able to offer, to be able to get the right talent in? Why would someone come to us rather than our competitors? What does our policies look like? You know, you've kind of got to do a lot more work nowadays to be able to attract the right people in, and then you've got to do a lot of work to retain them as well, which is obviously your gig.
Yeah, and it's a two-way process, isn't it? You know, so people turn up for interviews now. They might, you know, years gone by, you turn up, you'd be interviewed, and it would be kind of whether the employer would want you in the business, wouldn't it? That's completely changed. That ball game is different, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Very much a two-way process now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if anything, it's probably gone a little bit more towards the candidate side.
I would probably agree.
Yeah, I think I've always kind of the 20 years that I've been in recruitment, I've always banged on about the importance of having a 50-50 power relationship between the employer and the potential employee. But now with COVID happening, and people really stopping what they were doing and considering what it is that they wanted for the future for themselves, they've got a choice now as well. Yeah. So now they're going in and they're going, do I want to work here, as much as that person on the other side going, do I want them to work here? Yeah. And you've got to court as an employee, you've got to court a lot more, you know. Yeah. You've got to kind of, even just your adverts need to be appealing, but then also when you get them in and do your interviews, you can't do a traditional 60-minute interview anymore with someone, because that won't make you stand out if they're going for multiple interviews. So that individuality, you can't talk to the masses, you've got to talk to the individual to be able to make them feel special, or you won't get them and the competition will win them. And
I think that's really important, actually, when you've just said that there. If you bring somebody in and you do a 60-minute interview with somebody and you're just literally there and you ask them question after question after question, for all it is, that's what the employee wants to know. That just doesn't cut it really for the person who's coming, who wants to do something different, or the business needs to stand out. It's just not right anymore, is it?
It's just not engaging. And I think that's the whole thing about recruitment and retaining people. It's about engagement. Yeah. So it's about, trying to make them visualise what the role is and how they would fit into it, and what's their values and what's their culture and how's it exciting and how does it appeal to them personally, what impacts it going to have on their lives. Yeah. That's what they want to know. Yeah. They don't just want to be able to give you what's on their CV. They want to be able to talk about what the impact is for them and their families.
And I think that becomes a bigger piece, doesn't it, around kind of the families element of it, as you say, since COVID. Yeah. That's had a massive impact of where people want to be and what they want to do, and the fact that they want more flexibility, they want to be at home, they sometimes want to pick the kids up from school, or they've got someone that they care for and they need to be home to be able to help out. That's, again, changed our scope of bringing people into businesses and what people are looking forward to coming to businesses as well, isn't
Absolutely, 100%. I think previous to COVID, I feel really bad still saying the word COVID, because we do need to get on and move on from it, but it did
there is a significant point there, isn't it?
Everything. It did, definitely. From our world, from talent and sourcing, it definitely has changed things. But, people who thought they needed 2 salaries to run a household, one person was made redundant, another person was made at risk. risk. You know, they've kind of cut their cloth differently now. They've had an opportunity to look at, right, what do I actually need, or what did I think I needed? And that's been quite a liberating, kind of empowering thing for individuals to go, actually, I don't need to work for a paycheck anymore. Salary's still important. And because it is so competitive out there, it does become a little bit of a salary war. But lots of people aren't just looking for salaries. They're looking for, actually, I do want to still have that Friday off so I could be with the kids, or I do want to work 2 days from home, because actually COVID just stopped everything. And everyone was like, actually, what I thought I wanted and what I thought I needed, that's not important to me anymore. Something else is now.
Yeah, but it's took that moment of putting, a stopgap in there, isn't it, for everyone to be able to kind of take that judgment, because we would never have been at that point. People wouldn't have been working from home in the same way as they are now.
No.
There's so many things that have changed because of it.
Yeah.
Just thinking back to something that you said there about kind of that beginning of the recruitment process, and I commented on this the other day. You're obviously recruiting at the moment. You're recruiting for your team at the moment, and your adverts, is it the right word to use? Cool, the funky, the different, the kind of, they're attracting, like I'm looking at them and I kind of watch. So you do kind of a little video, don't you, kind of with your team on that's there already. And, the pictures that you do to promote your team are all, and I know you need to do this because it's what your business and you're trying to
practice what you preach.
Practice what you're preaching. But it does get the engagement, doesn't it? I see that on LinkedIn and you kind of think, oh yeah, that is engaging. That would encourage someone who's, of that type, who wants to come into recruitment, do something different, and kind of, it shows that, you've got a range of different people that are working in there of different ages, but actually the environment can be, what I'm taking from is fun, enjoyable, like the interaction. And then obviously when I met with your team the other day, that's the people that they are,
It's
that's
true, isn't it? Yeah,
it's
which is really important.
Which is really good. So not only if you kind of, sold that image of, of it being cool and funky, kind of, and that's the place for people to want to work. I don't know whether I'm old enough to say funky, too old to say funky.
I quite like it.
I take it as a compliment. But that's what you've put out there. And then actually then meeting your team, that's what you've got as well, which actually just even that level of it, I think is great. The consistency of it. So what was your driver behind, obviously that's a part of your culture, isn't it? So what was your driver behind thinking that that's how you want to be seen by others?
Yeah, I think when I go out and I do sessions with other businesses, I talk about the fact that, smaller businesses in particular, they always say we can't compete with the likes of Google. And I'm like, but not everyone wants to work for Google. We've got to find out what it is about you that makes you individual, and then the right person will want to work for you. So it's kind of a little bit like practice what you preach. So we are a smaller business. We are pretty new in our journey. We are all individuals. So it's kind of like trying to find out, or what we did was try to find out what our proposition was out there, which is something that I'm talking to every business that we're working with at the moment around. We are fun, we are entrepreneurial, we are a little bit spontaneous, we can make decisions.
Funky.
Yeah, funky. I'm going to totally take that. I'm going to go back to the office and say, guess what, guys, we're funky. Me, Alison will love that. Alison and Leslie will absolutely love that, we're funky. Camille will be like, of course we are funky. What are you talking about, Sam? We've always done we're funky.
We've always done the
But the kind of the And also actually probably what's really important as well to say is that when we've had a look at our stats around how we engage with our audience, things to do with values and people and videos are the things that stand out. And we recommend that to our clients as well. So it's a little bit between the what do we want to be known for out there? How are we different? Because we are very different. We're a recruitment agency. So how do we get it out there? But also what works, and what works out there in social media is video, people and values, in my opinion. That's what works for us. Yeah.
And that's what's obviously shown from your team, but then obviously you can then, so we share clients as well, don't we? We've got some clients that we've that we both work together, and you can see that in what it is that they're doing. So I think one of the things that we spoke about recently actually was we do kind of like a culture book. So I'm thinking of one of our clients up in Northumberland way, and their culture book instead of a handbook is kind of really good. It's kind of very engagement. It's very much about their business, and it shows that the pictures and the images that are in there. I think to me, if I started working in that business and that was the culture book, the handbook that I received, I'd be like, all right, I'm all in.
Yes.
Kind of, and actually to then mirror that in the recruitment part of the strategy, I think that's kind of a bit of a central point. But then to you've done kind of the beginning part of that strategy to be able to get it in there, to be able to encourage the people in. So when they're in, they've got that culture built together, isn't it?
I think it's really important that you follow that circle round. So we talk about, in our worlds, we talk about employee cycles. I think it starts right at recruitment. It starts right at the brand and bit, right as the kind of the shop window, really, when people are looking into your business. And then it needs to go throughout everything that you do with people. So I think if it becomes disjointed when you just use your values, for example, just in the job description, or it has to actually be in every single bit. So that's when you live and breathe something. That's when it becomes the culture. So I kind of bang on about the fact that it has to be consistent. If you're going to talk about it in one thing, let's not make it a surprise. Let's talk about it in every single thing. Let's work out what's important to us and make sure that we do it from the start to the end.
And when we say about doing it in all of the things, I mean, it is things like making sure that your job descriptions show that you value in your culture.
Absolutely.
Things like your performance management, like your KPIs and kind of your deliverables. And it's about making sure that consistency is there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if we go out there and say, for example, our business, we're individuals, but we come together, we've got the same values, things like internally from an employee's perspective, we make joint decisions on things. They're things that we stand by, that we continuously do to make sure that we have that ethos and we are that kind of business. I really believe one of the benefits as well over the past few years is a lot of the polish and hierarchy that was historically there has kind of gone, which means that people don't need to have sleepless nights for unnecessary stress. If you could just be honest and be a little bit vulnerable every now and again, actually it breeds a really nice culture where everyone can have a say, everyone can have opinions, and everyone can just look after each other. And actually it makes for a much better working environment, and people will stay with you because they believe in what you do and how you manage them. So,
would you help a business kind of look at the culture and the values as you're going in and talking about their initial kind of what they need to do and kind of working with them? Is that one of the first starting points that you just discuss from there? And how do you do that with them, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually when we get a first inquiry, it'll be because a client or a business is struggling to recruit and they've got vacancies out there that they just can't find the right people for. And that tends to be the first foot in the door. And what we realise very quickly, or what they realise and we help them to realise, actually is, why are people leaving in the first place? What does your exit interview say? What are you doing? What's around the internal piece at the moment that you're offering that are making people leave, or you're not getting the people that you're looking to bring into the business? So we kind of run recruitment campaigns because obviously they've got some burning needs that need to be filled there and now. While we're doing that, we work strategically with them to understand what is happening internally that then can have an impact on recruitment. So we do quite a lot of listening groups, and we do a lot of just going and visiting and feeling it and being part of it. So an example is we've got a new client that we've been working with just for a couple of months. They were struggling to recruit in the Northwest. They've got a Northeast office as well. We went down to the Northwest, which was a 5 a.m. start, and we weren't heading to the airport. I was gutted. Do you know when you get up at that time in the morning to get ready?
It's okay to go to the airport.
Like, it's all right, I've got the airport, but I wasn't. I was just going on the A1 down to Manchester with the team. And we went in and we spoke to people. We talked to people about, why did they choose to work there over their competitors or somewhere else that could have got their skill set. We had some time with their senior management team and talked about what they thought and what was the mission of the business and what are the values and do we live and breathe them. We did a lot of work with them just to really understand what it is about that office, why we were potentially struggling, some recommendations that we could make. So now kind of the work on the back of that is kind of going in with the senior leadership team across the full group and talking about actually we maybe got a little bit of work to do there on culture, maybe got some training to do there, values are not installed within that business, maybe need to do a little bit more communication, just to try and make it so when we do get the individuals in, that they do stay, because we've covered all the elements of what we are, what that business is, what it's about, what it offers. Yeah.
And I think that values piece, I'm just thinking one of the large organisations that I've just been working with is a Japanese company. They've had quite a few issues and concerns over recent months. And one of my things was, again, kind of what from that recruitment element of, well, what are you putting out there, but actually what are the company values? And they're like, oh, we've got a book somewhere, we've got a book. And they went off and found this book that was, and give me the book. And I said, oh, does anybody know what's in the book? So it was issued a few years ago. I said, all right, that's great. But it goes to show that these big companies don't always have, a culture is created because of every day to day life and kind of how people are coming and going within it. But from the point of view of actually what's the fundamental values of the business, nobody would be able to tell you what they are.
No.
And I think that's a real important point of like, how do you suggest that those type of things are installed into people, talking to people, and kind of what do you make suggestions of how it becomes embedded really?
Well, what we do is we'll run an EVP and employee value proposition session with the senior team, but we'll also do listening groups with the internal team.
Right.
So we kind of send out a questionnaire that asks them what they think, because I have worked in other businesses as well where the senior team just tell you what the values are and they just put them on a wall. They put them on a wall and then you look at this wall and you're like, oh, that's it. And then when you have particularly bad days, you're like, that's not what our values are. Yeah. So I think it's about trying to get the buy-in from the internal team to hear their reasons and kind of the senior team will have their ideas on what they want their business to stand for, but it's more important about what the living and breathing of the people who are actually in the roles, what they think. So we get their insight by doing one-to-ones and a questionnaire, and then we sit with the senior leadership team and talk to them about what they want to be known for out there as representing the business that they've created, and then we put them together and say, actually, it feels like this, and try to kind of marry it together so it's not any corporate office in London or wherever who are kind of spouting these values. It's actually owned by the individuals, because then when you start going back into recruitment and you start sharing things and adverts and it's got wording on that individuals within the team have actually come up with themselves, they're more likely to share that, tell their friends, spread it around their network because they've been part of it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just explaining to the senior team, look, if we get the buy-in and we understand what the reality is, it will help you not just have your name at the helm when it comes to how are we going to recruit. Everyone will be proud of it, it'll be true, and therefore everyone will push it forward together.
Yeah, it's about people taking ownership for what it is that they're doing, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And people do want to take ownership. Just sometimes we forget or we're too busy to ask them what they think.
And I think that engagement of bringing people into it, I think, is really an important point, isn't it? Because that's where people are going to buy into it more, isn't it? Because I think, oh yeah, I was part of that.
Yeah.
So I engage with that element of it as well, isn't it? So they get that interaction and, as you say, start promoting it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, those people have come to work for the business and you probably want similar people to them. So if you find out why they wanted to work for the business in the first instance and what's important to them and what we think we could do better and all of that sort of stuff, you can then get your audience tone right when you want to speak to similar people to get them into the business, because that's basically about finding your candidate personas and the people that you're looking for and speaking in the same way. And sometimes as a leader in the business, you're not going to try and attract someone similar to you. You're trying to attract similar people to the people who are already in your organisation. So using their words and their voices and stuff, it's going to be so much more beneficial than using how you see it.
Yeah. And I think that's
sense?
Yeah, completely. And I think people do exactly that, don't they? I'm just thinking when you said about, an owner of the business or a senior person in the business would sometimes just try and recruit somebody who is a bit of a mirror image of them or somebody that I think. And actually there's been several times over the years that I've gone, why did you make that recruitment choice? That you've just recruited you again. Yeah. And actually that's not always what's needed, is it? Because you don't get the challenge, you don't get the difference of what you need to be able to take the business forward and to be able to, I suppose, do the day-to-day as well, isn't it?
And I think you get a little bit frustrated. If you try and recruit someone like you expect them to think like you.
Yeah.
But they don't. No one thinks like you. So then you start kind of judging them on the fact that you thought they were similar. So that poor individual actually is off to a bit of a bad start.
Yeah.
Whereas if you identify that it's just someone different to me, then their opinions and stuff are a lot more kind of creative, and they come out trying to kind of create little machines and pots of people who are exactly the same doesn't kind of give any room for that creativity and that kind of growth of different opinions and diverse people and perspectives.
Okay. So we're at the point whereby you've done kind of that value piece and you've done the culture piece with them and you've tried to embed it a little bit more. Then what would you do? I mean, obviously, so you've got some recruitment needs. What would you then do?
Then you would start looking at all of the material that you use to recruit, and you would pull it all out and you would use the messaging that you would agree that was the consistent messaging that you wanted out there on behalf of your business. So things like your values, things like your mission, things like your journey so far, talking about the fact that you've been in business for the last 11 years and you've grown from this to this and you've got a turnover of this to this and your directors are award winning or whatever it is that is the USP and the proposition that has been agreed because your internal team have said said what they think, and your senior team have all sat around a table and agreed that it's the same message, you'd put that into all the materials again to make sure it was consistent.
Yeah.
So job adverts, you'd pick those back up and you'd go, right, the first 2 paragraphs in every single job advert is going to look similar. It's going to have the same words, same phrases, same feel, so that when people have a look at your adverts, they're like, yes, I know which business that belongs to. It belongs to the business that I'd seen recruiting 6 months ago. You'd also tie it into your social media strategy. So it wasn't just vacancy after vacancy after vacancy that was going over social media channels. It would be, right, actually we're saying that we're about people in the proposition. Therefore, let's get some stuff about people on our social media to break that up, just having vacancy after vacancy. You'd look at things like your careers page. You know, when people are going to research who you are and do they want to work in the organisation, is what we've agreed is the values, the culture, the proposition, is that in your careers page? Job packs, all of that sort of stuff. And like, as you mentioned there, like your staff handbooks, it kind of goes into that element and it starts to go into, you know, what does your performance, what does, you know, when you're doing your quarterly reviews, how do your values tie into that? And that's when it kind of steps into your kind of specialism rather than mine. But it's kind of starting that people process, so that further on up through the employee cycle, they're getting that agreement that everyone has agreed that they stand for through every kind of vein of that.
And do you think that makes a difference? Obviously, one of the big issues now is obviously skills gap, isn't it? You know, in fact, it's not just a skills gap. There's just not enough people to do the jobs that are available anymore at the moment. So how do you think that it's impacted upon, you know, I mean, obviously you've got 2 avenues there. You've got skills gap and you've got, you know, the number of people available to do the jobs. And as we said there at the beginning, that conversation of actually, do I want to work for you or do you want to work for me? You know, kind of that conversation. How do you think that that's impacted against all of, you know, the work that you can do there around that value and culture? How do you think that makes a difference?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So firstly, I think if you're doing all that kind of strategic work about who you are, then being able to recruit the people that you're looking for, you'd have a much better chance at doing that over your competitors. But then secondly, I think having those conversations, those longer term holistic conversations also helps you kind of come up with how are you going to tackle that problem, because we know it's not going to go away. So is it that actually we want to be the business that wants to invest in the future of the region or our industry, and we might set up a future talent program? You know, should we get graduates and put a graduate program together, or should we do the apprenticeship program, because the apprenticeship levy has just opened up so many routes to different kind of qualifications that now available through apprenticeship routes. It's around kind of, if we sit at that table and we talk about, as an employer, I want to be known for changing the reputation of the industry. Okay, right, well, how are you going to do that through recruiting people, and how are you going to lead that by bringing something to the industry? So you can start coming up with some suggestions around, you want 100%, this person's 100%. Actually, we know that that's probably not going to be possible. So what is the plan B? How does that tie into your values? How does that tie into your mission? How does that tie into the longer term plan? If we're investing someone for a year or 2 years, but in the third year, they'll be highly effective, and actually you'll have a succession plan there, and you'll have people who will stay with you forever.
Okay, so it's quite an interesting process element of it, really, isn't it? Because I was just thinking while you were talking there that actually if there's a company that's out there and they're doing all of that, you know, and they're really pushing themselves and not just the recruitment as in, we've got this job, we've got this vacancy, we've got this, but actually drip feeding through that with your people side of things, or your culture or your values, kind of putting that into that will make the company stand out, won't it? Which means that for all it's a small job market, actually the people will be kind of more inclined to go, oh, actually, I've seen that company advertise, I've seen them do it before. They're consistent in their approach, and everybody inevitably looks back on social media now, don't they, and kind of like looking through to be able to think, does that work, does that not, you know, kind of is that a fit for me? Because ultimately a lot of this now is about, are you, the employee, the right fit for the employer from a cultural and values point, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's why people will be retained. If you're paying the right salary and you've got the right bonus scheme, but you haven't got the right values, people they won't stay. So I think it's first and foremost the values and the culture, and then the benefits and the remuneration is kind of secondary. But I think that kind of feel as talent kind of out there, being shouted at from different angles by different employers. They want to get the feel from the business to be like, actually, I can see myself sitting next to that person on that advert with a big smiley face.
Yeah.
It's that.
They can relate.
It's visual. It's visual, isn't it? It's visual. It's very kind of emotional. It's that feeling in the pit of your stomach of, if I'm going to leave my kids, if I'm going to leave my puppy, if I'm going to leave these people at home, I want to work in a really good bunch of people who have got something similar to me.
Yeah.
And that's why it all needs to be articulated really well and agreed up front to be able to put in your adverts and any kind of marketing material that is to attract people.
To bring people into the business, isn't it? And just make you stand out.
Absolutely. Because if you just go black and white, job description, paste it into an advert template, you've got no chance.
No. And I think one of our clients was quite very resistant around putting, they would put kind of quite standard vacancies out, but they would never put the salaries out on it as well.
Oh, it drives me insane.
No, that does me as well. And from speaking to them, I was very much like, no, we need to make sure the salary's on there, because actually, I don't know, the job might be, a 18 grand a year job, when actually these people are on. Well, it happened to a situation with one of my friends, and she was like, I'm really interested in that job. And I was thinking, it's not on, you're on £32,000 a year, but actually this job's only 18. I knew what the amount that the money was in the role, but actually that person could have gone along, they could have put the time in, put their effort in to be able to fill out an application form or do a CV or do your covering letter, and spent, people might spend 3-4 hours to be able to get that right, because the right impression they want to make. And then all comes to all, complete gap of the salary side of things. What do you think about that side of things?
Oh gosh, how long have you got? Every single client that we go into, we talk about this as one of the first things. I think if anyone says that they've got values of honesty, integrity, all of those kind of buzzwords that I'm like, let's get away from those words and let's talk about something that's real. But if they were originally those words, I'd be like, so why don't we tell people about the salaries? I just don't get it. I think it shows individuals looking at them that you've got something potentially to hide, even if you haven't.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kind of messages I get back when I challenge it is that, oh, well, someone internally has paid this, so we need to be careful that we don't cheese them off. And again, it goes back to values around just have a conversation with that individual. And if they want to apply, they can apply for it.
Yeah.
And if they haven't got the skills, then that's why the salary's higher. Let's just be honest and transparent, and let's just let people kind of... when you talk about the whole time wasted thing, it's a huge thing. And I think from a reputation perspective, it can ruin your reputation. And you've got to also remember that these people might be customers as well. So depending on what your product is or your service is, if you cheese them off because you just have chosen to not be honest for whatever reason, they might not use your brand and apply for a role again with you. Yeah. And anyone who puts adverts out on the likes of Indeed will say that you already get hundreds of people who just want to have a chance of putting their CVs in. And if none of them know what the salary is, you're going to get even more that are going to come into your inbox that you're going to have to go through. And if you want to be a good employer, you will respond to all of them.
Good
luck in responding to 1,000 people who are just going, I'll see what the salary is. And you could have taken out 800 of those people if you'd just been honest and told them what the salary bracket was.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it from the context of, going through and actually filling out your application form or spending 2, 3, 4 hours on something. And then actually some companies just don't respond. I think it's just so rude.
Yeah.
But some people go, it's not ideal for our job. So they just put it to one side, don't they? And actually, someone has taken the time. And if you think of lives are busy. Everybody's busy, aren't they? We're all, going at it continuously each and every day. And actually for someone to take that amount of time to fill the application form out, it's a very difficult situation that they come in where they think, well, what's the point in doing that? Somebody couldn't even be bothered to respond.
Absolutely.
So it is closing the gap on that, isn't it? It is
closing the gap. And it's kind of, you would do it with your customers, so why wouldn't you do it with your people? So I don't understand why sometimes things are seen differently. Like when you do your strategy for how you're going to find new customers, why don't you do your strategy on how you're going to find new people? Yeah. But instead you do the transactional stuff on trying to find people, and then you do all the strategy on the customer bit. So if you thought your reputation was going to be tarnished with the customer, you would do absolutely everything to retain them. Why wouldn't you do that with a person who's looking at you and going, I believe in that brand. That's why I want to put an advert. That's why I want to apply to that advert. And then you give them nothing back because you're tarnishing your reputation, you're tarnishing the brand. But I think that goes back to your question about if you don't put salaries on, then you're just going to invite lots of people through that you cannot manage all of the responses that ultimately will hurt the business's perception.
It is. I just think that a business can let themselves down quite easily because, everybody knows everybody, don't they? So it kind of, it just becomes a conversation. I applied for a job there, but actually they didn't bother responding to us, and people think, oh, well.
It's embarrassing as well, isn't
it?
I remember a while back, obviously before I set up my business, I remember putting an application in somewhere and feeling like, oh my goodness, it's quite, especially if you're employed, and good people are employed. So if a good person was going to come out, reach out, put their head above the parapet and go, right, I'm going to apply for that, you tell people. So you'll sit around the kitchen table and go, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to say, I'm going to put my CV and say what happens. And then the next family meeting that you're at, so what happened with that? Oh, you heard nothing. It's just a bit embarrassing. It's just a little bit like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said anything.
And people do keep that close, like cards close to the chest when it comes to that, doesn't it? Because they don't necessarily want to over-advertise that that's what they've done, is it? Like even to family or friends, because people do come back to you to say, well, did you hear anything? What happened?
And you're like, oh, nothing. And then you feel a bit rubbish. And then you feel a bit let down by the brand. And then you feel like, I'm not applying to them again.
But it knocks your confidence as well,
it does.
doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And recruitment should never be about that. That's why I chose recruitment over HR. It's all the positive stuff, Louise.
I'll try and be positive.
Absolutely. You're just a lot more patient than me, I think.
I do try. No, but I think that's a part of the element, isn't it? That the recruitment is bringing the right people into the business, and then my part of it is really managing the people once they're in there, isn't it?
It is.
But
100%.
And it's that kind of mix, but getting that recruitment element of it right to get the right person in the business enables the HR element of it, the people management, to be a completely different experience.
Absolutely.
I think so. Obviously, we've got examples around kind of HR, our management of kind of the people element of it. And we've got a particular situation where we've got somebody who's been in the company for maybe it's 4 or 5 years, and the whole relationship started to dissolve down now. So it's people are upset by it. There's allegations that are put into there. There's bullying, intimidation. It creates such an atmosphere, and actually it's a really difficult situation to deal with from a people management point of view. And actually kind of backtracking through, it's kind of, thinking about those culture and values and whether people fit, in the organisation at the beginning, isn't it? And, and people for the first few months might think, oh, yeah, this is me, I can do this. But actually, longer term, that's not always the situation, is it? It's got to be about what your core beliefs and values are. Absolutely. To be able to work within that business, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think those things can't be changed. You can work on skills and you can work on experience, but you can't work on people's approach and what they morally feel in the pit of their stomachs. And I do think that people underestimate the importance of recruitment and getting that bit done right, so that actually they could kind of solve that problem later on down the line of the kind of impact of getting the wrong recruit through the door. So like you say, disrupting the people around them, upsetting people going on sick, all of that sort of stuff, could have potentially been avoided. If we'd maybe spent a little bit more time thinking about, right, what is important to us and who are we and what do we stand for and what is the culture and the values of the business, and we're not going to compromise on that. Individual needs to come through with examples of how they live and breathe that themselves in their daily life, never mind just their work life.
Yeah. And I think some companies just end up with a bit of a quick fix, don't they?
I can't do the quick fix thing.
It is like a band-aid, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think you're just waiting for the trouble to hit the fan.
Yeah, it is. Very well put.
Thank you.
but it is that, isn't it? It's kind of actually
it never works.
No, we need somebody quick. We need them. We're desperate and stuff. But actually, sometimes wait, and that's a month or two. I think, as you said before, kind of that element of people who are employed. Are very often a good candidate.
They'll be their employers will be holding on to them. They won't be your active candidate who's sitting there saying, I can start tomorrow. Yeah. These people will wait for the right proposition. So doing the legwork and doing all the work in advance will absolutely attract the people who are the people that you want, really. And I just think that whole kind of transactional aspect of recruitment is exactly why I won't get involved in any bun fights over vacancies. We, at Talentheads, we never go and try and find job after job after job after job. We don't want hundreds of clients with 1 or 2 jobs each. We want to work with businesses who will be recruiting steadily, but actually want to recruit properly, strategically. They want to look at building their businesses through people that are on a growth strategy, and they want to do the right things rather than, I need CVs tomorrow. Well, actually, an agency could do that for you, but are they going to be the right CVs? How are they going to speak to the candidates on your behalf? What they're telling the candidates, is that what you want the candidate to know? What are the key messages? How have you briefed that agency? So there's the transactional, very quick fix, I don't think works for anyone.
No, and I just think from that point of view of getting that bum on a seat, it just goes wrong from I mean, sometimes it works, don't get us wrong, sometimes it does work, but, it can go wrong quite quickly. And for the sake of sometimes waiting, a month or 2 months to be able to get that right person into the role, sometimes I think that's it's so important.
It's absolutely
for long-term gain, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it really is. And the impact, like you mentioned before, is so huge if it doesn't go right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a heartache. And I think definitely as an owner of a business, when things go wrong with your people, it hurts personally.
It does, especially when you're a small business.
Yeah.
I think you can't help but take offence.
It's personal.
At it,
you kind of feel as if, right, is this something that I'm doing? You start questioning yourself, your confidence levels, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas if you can make a peace with the fact that someone didn't work out for a different reason other than we should have recruited better, then that's okay. You can let that one go. But if it's like, I knew in the interview that something just wasn't right, something wasn't pinging right, or that person said something, I was like, that's controversial to what our values are. Trust it.
Yeah, because it's where you started from, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's about, ultimately, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it was interesting what you said just towards the beginning there was around you don't always have to have that right person at the very beginning, as far as you might do a graduate program or you might a program as such, but you might just take one or two graduates on, but you've got a longer term aim for them. So it might be a case that actually you start them as being a graduate, but then your aim is in 2 years' time, this is what you want them to be. How do you support a business with doing that? Because actually it's all well and good. And again, a few of our businesses said, all right, I'm taking a graduate on now and they're going to be X in 2 years' time. But they haven't got a plan in between times, and we kind of say, well, you need to start doing this. But so what type of advice do you give around that support element of it?
I think you've got to be realistic. So I think depending on the size of the business will depend on the expectation of the candidate. So a smaller business, kind of less than 10 employees, they're not expecting you to have a plan for the next 12 months of a rotation here, a shadowing here, or going on site here. It doesn't need to be as thought through. No, actually, it's not thought through. Probably doesn't need to be as scheduled as that and formal. Yeah, but it definitely needs to be thought through. So that proposition to that kind of graduate coming in is that it's entrepreneurial. You get to kind of choose your own path. We bring the right people in, but then we work together to be able to get you to this future leader status, and you'll help us do that. I suppose it's about a different proposition. Whereas your bigger businesses, the candidates will be expecting you to be able to demonstrate what it is that you're going to actually offer them compared to the competitors. So, for example, accountancy is a great one for this. Accountancy firms love to bring graduates in every single year, and you've got your big four who are going to have a very scheduled program of, in your first 3 months you'll do this, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And if you aren't thinking that way, candidates will see you in a different way and won't apply to your program. So I suppose the expertise that we can bring is that kind of acknowledgement of what your competition is outside. So we work with businesses at all different sizes. So the advice we would give to one business compared to another business would be very different depending on their sector and their size, really. And then it would be around, right, okay, the expectation is for you, Mr. Business Owner, that actually you do have a program, and therefore KPMG's program looks like this, and then this program looks like this. So actually the proposition out there to go out and recruit someone is that we've thought this through, we've put pen to paper, and we've got something that's scheduled. Whereas on the other side, it could be very much a Mrs. Startup business. You want to have a graduate program or a graduate scheme or whatever it is that you want to call it, because actually there's a skill shortage, and you want to be the responsible person to be able to get that skill shortage up and help contribute to that. Therefore, we need to be aware that we need individuals who are entrepreneurial, X, Y, and Z. That's the proposition. Get them in. I suppose it's about setting expectations, and I suppose it's about being able to be aware of what's outside of your bubble so that your proposition is bigger than someone else's proposition who will want the same person as you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely, because I think you then, as you say, you're looking at the same, pool of candidates, aren't you? You're looking at the same graduates potentially, but what's going to make your business stand out as opposed to somebody else's to make sure that engagement's there for them, isn't it?
Absolutely, because people won't just be going for one direction. People will be sitting there looking and going, right, I want to work for a smaller business because of X, Y, and Z, or I want to work for a bigger business because of X, Y, and Z. So it's not as if you'll have thousands of people all applying for every single role. They won't do that. They'll apply for the one that is personal for them, that hits the mark for them. So again, it's about that honesty and that verbalization and articulation around what it is that your proposition is to get the right person who wants that.
And I think that comes, I'm just thinking, a couple of weeks ago I made someone redundant who was about 23, 24. He'd done his degree and was working in this particular business. But then he was leaving that business, obviously we made him redundant. But he didn't know what he wanted to do next, by the time I saw him to do the second stage consultation, he says, I've applied for 5 different jobs, and the range of the jobs were so big. But actually, what I'm just thinking in the context of what you're saying is that actually if he had applied for, 2 or 3 different graduate programs, or opportunities, then the pathways could be very, very different for him to engage with. So actually,
it's harder for him.
Yeah, definitely. And but at least he could potentially get the buy-in, because he'd think, actually, no, that sounds really interesting. Because he wasn't, probably not the right word, but not fussed on what he was going to do next, because he didn't have a strong desire of what his job needed to be. He was very open to what was available. So and there'll be many young people that are in that situation, won't there?
Yeah, there will be. And I suppose it's very much like what we suggest to employers. It would be for candidates around, find out what people say around you, find out who you are, try and understand what it is that you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. Try and put as many real life situations into it as possible to be able to spend the time to consider the roles you want to go for, because the employer on the other side will know if you really want it or not.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't matter how much we educate employers about how candidate-led it is, they still will think, do I want that person in the business or not? So the candidate needs to show that they are interested in that business specifically, and that's why they should be the candidate who's successful. So I think it's just a bit about, if you apply for lots of different things as a candidate, it will be diluted. The intention, the kind of way that it will be received you can see that it's diluted and you won't stand out. So I suppose it's about both sides standing out, employers standing out and candidates standing out by knowing what it is that they want. But again, my thoughts on that would be, speak to people who know you well. Do you like structure and rigour? Do you like policy and practice? Then you're probably better in a bigger organisation. Do you like to think on your feet? Do you want to work in a business where your heart's racing all the time? Do you not mind a bit of risk? That's maybe a smaller business. So just starting to try and identify who you are and where your values are will lead you down
a particular pathway, isn't it? Yeah. So it would help really people understand and structure what their future needs to look like as well.
Because if people are looking for stability, you kind of know as a job seeker what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for a good just salary, that's all that matters to you, right? Okay, well then that takes you down one route, but so that means that you're not really that bothered about staying around for a long time somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's loads of questions that you can ask yourself and just be true to yourself around actually what is the thing that's going to make you happy, because it's all about happiness at the end.
Yeah, and about being able to do it. And obviously we've talked about kind of graduates from that talent exercise. What about other people within the business? Obviously you specialise in the talent element and the support that you provide there as well. So do you find that other companies are doing, are putting people through talent opportunities, or are kind of people coming into the roles and they think, right, okay, we've got that bum on the seat and they're going to fit with the culture and things. But are people wanting to develop people? What's your thoughts on that?
I think when you go through your EVP, so if you go through your employee value proposition, then you start to look at one of the kind of 5 strands that I talk about is career. And one of the careers is, what do you want to be known for? Do you want to be known for someone who develops people, or do you want to be known for someone who offers stable employment, for example? If you're saying that you want to be known as developing people, you need to stand by that. need. So things like that, when I've worked with businesses and they've identified that they do want to progress people and they want a good succession plan, and they're proud of the people who have stayed because they've gone from one role to another role, or they've gone sideways and upwards. We look at things like skill matrices around being able to explain to people how they can grow within the business and which job descriptions are for when we're looking at policies and stuff. So from a process perspective, to go from one level to another level to another level, what's additional on the job description that you would need to be able to go to that next level? And what does that equate to when it comes to a salary? What does that equate to when it comes to actually going and being part of a training program or an apprenticeship or something like that? A lot of the business that I'm working with, because they are growing businesses, they do use a lot of developing people to keep and retain people. Yeah. So like with the apprenticeship levy, get people even degrees through that route is something to be able to retain people. And being able to communicate with those people who have said that they are looking for a progressive employer is being able to show them how they will progress throughout the business. So we definitely help with recommending even things like mentors, mentors, buddies, all that stuff around just trying to share and pull people in and keep their arms around them and don't let anyone else get them, because it's just so important that happens.
That stays, isn't it? I think from I'm just thinking back when I worked in automotive several years back now, we used to do an awful lot of succession planning because we had about 150 people in the business, and it was about very much the people that we've got, how can we move them through, and we had some great successes of people coming in as kind of your minimum wage operator and leaving as being kind of a quality engineer and being able to take that next step, or being able to leave as kind of a lead production supervisor and being able to be a production manager elsewhere. And actually there's a real a real sense of achievement from the point of view of the business being able to do that, and from for me, from a HR point of view, that actually would given people these opportunities over time, and actually upon leaving they were financially a lot better off. They had so much more knowledge, they had the skills and the ability, and kind of they had more opportunities to be able to go and move on to as well. So there's quite a big element of that, and there's a real big point around succession planning if you get it right, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, goodness me, I think this is probably a very big sweeping statement, but it does tend to be a little bit easier to recruit more junior team members that you can then invest in, and you're kind of more likely to get it right, because if you make a big appointment and it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. So if you kind of bring people in and nurture them, not only will you get their commitment because you've invested in them financially and from a development perspective, but also you're more likely to fill the gaps, but you'll fill them on a longer term basis. So it just makes more sense. It makes everyone feel nice. It's got a good feel about it that you're developing people, but then from a risk perspective on it as a business owner or senior stakeholder in a business, it's a less risky route.
And you've got the buy-in from the employee.
Oh, absolutely. They'll always be thankful. Their families will be thankful. You kind of, depending on what you want to build your culture to be, that to me is quite important. That people around you are proud of that person working for your business. That's how word of mouth gets out there and reputations are built.
And it's just the buy-in from the employee means that they're going to stay, doesn't it? That retention part of it again, that, the people are there, aren't they? They want to stay, they want to engage, and they're invested in the business, isn't it?
And they'll tell their friends. And really what you're looking for when you're looking at recruitment is that your speculative inquiries, people are constantly putting applications in saying, I don't know if you're recruiting yet, but I want to work for you. It'll come from people talking about how brilliant you are as an employer. That's what I say to all the businesses that I work for. I'm always like, right, when we get that inbox flooded with speculative CVs, we have done it.
You've achieved.
We don't need to put adverts out. We're getting people who have got the right values, who can see the benefit of working in this business, and they're coming directly to us.
I do remember back in automotive days where we needed a whole new shift to be able to operate. And we didn't do one piece of advertising. We literally put, and just said family and friends, just who wants to come work for us.
That is like
and it was literally, we got 30 staff, and we did a whole shift. And it was kind of, obviously you're kind of going through the CVs, but the fact that, kind of recommendations, and don't get us wrong, I'm not a massive fan of recruiting people who are family members.
You've got to be careful.
You've got to be very careful of how it's done. But, you know, from that element of it, it was really good for us. You know, it was recommendations that came through. So it didn't cost us anything to recruit that new shift of people.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
We're doing something similar with a business up in Wooler in Northumberland. They're opening a brand new facility, a new experience centre, a brilliant brand, lots of investment in there. And what they've been doing, where their internal recruitment team, we've spent the last few months and they've spent the last few years just warming up the community. Being out there, being seen, sponsoring things, giving back to the local community. They've got a shop on the shop front just saying, we're here if anyone's got any questions about what this means for the community. We've had open days. And the last open day we went to, I think Alison, one of my team members, recorded we saw 102 people within a 5-hour space because the messaging out there, we've just been so present, walking around, giving kids flags, you know, just doing things that engage with the community where the local community goes, actually, they've got a really good ethos. I want to be part of it. So we're releasing 50 roles in the next 6 weeks. And we think the majority of those will come from people who have followed over the last couple of years and definitely the last couple of months. Yeah. And that is such a success.
Achievement, I was going to say. Brilliant achievement, isn't
it?
The
pride, though, the pride of it. And then it comes back to the importance of managing that. So anyone who's not successful, who's followed that journey for so long, how you deal with that person's extremely important.
Yeah, because they're in the community. You need to make sure that their interaction's right, isn't it?
Yeah, the reputation's managed and that they get a nice taste in their mouth, even if they're not successful.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you're aiming for. If your brand's strong, your employer brand's strong, and you're out there and you're real and you're authentic and people can feel you, that's what will help you recruit in the longer term and recruit the right people.
Yeah, I completely agree. So just obviously going through what you've discussed there, obviously we've talked about loads of different aspects of what you can do within the recruitment element, and I think there's so many positives that you've been able to come up with there as well. Do you want to just really, it in essence falls under like a recruitment strategy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And can you just explain about what that would be and how that would look for a business? If they're thinking, right, okay, I've listened to all of this, well, how can we pull that together and what is a recruitment strategy? What would it look like?
Yeah. So for me, I think the recruitment strategy is about your plan and your longer term. So basically it's about kind of stopping the transactional stuff and starting to look at the bigger picture. So start to look at things like, what is your employee value proposition? What is your brand that you want to be out there? What does your adverts look like? Where are the channels that you're going to advertise your roles on and for what reasons? What's your values look like, and are they actually what your audience wants to look for? There's lots of work that you need to do before you even put pen to paper and say, I've got a role there. So it's about kind of working on what's the mission, what's the journey, what are we as a business that we want to go out there and we want to represent, and then how do we at every part of the recruitment cycle reaffirm what those things that we've agreed that we stand for are in every single part of that journey.
So obviously it's important to have the recruitment strategy there, which obviously is really what you've just covered there, and obviously all the important aspects of it, and that really will help people to attract and get the best talent that they can to be able to join within the business. And it's also about thinking around that people strategy of what you're going to do, how people are going to move into the business and what element of that as well, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what would be your biggest piece of advice for a business owner or a managers that can realistically implement to enhance their talent acquisition strategy?
Okay. I think it would be talking to your team. My advice would be go and speak to your team and find out why the individuals, especially your shining stars, why they chose you over your competitors, and listen. And I think that's a source of knowledge, insight, information that then you can use to put that into your marketing material, your employer brand that goes out there that appeals to similar people that you want into your business.
Okay,
so
talk to people. What you've got.
Yeah, it's great for engagement as well. If you speak to your people, like we say, what Louise, you and I have said beforehand is, if they feel part of it, they'll spread the word too.
Yeah. And it is that, I'm just thinking from a business point of view, we would often do kind of like a client satisfaction. Really, it's it's the internal satisfaction that you've got there, isn't it? Yeah. Not by doing a survey as such, but it is the individual talking that makes a difference, doesn't it? Because people, again, feel listened to and they're engaged back into the business as well, isn't it?
And it's real. I think that's what people are looking for now. They're looking to engage with an employer who's real.
Yeah.
No more fluff, no more polish. Just what is it?
Yeah.
Because that's what will chain them. The expectations are real.
Okay, so What's your biggest piece of advice for businesses who are struggling to attract and retain the top talent?
Yeah, I think it would be, again, just to stop and breathe and to think it through, get the right people together, have a conversation, stop doing what you've always done and got what you've always got if it's not working for you. If an advert's been out for a week and it's not worked, it's not going to work in the second week. Just stop doing what doesn't work and sit down and start questioning why and start thinking about what else you could do differently. Have a conversation with us.
Yeah.
We can help. Definitely, even if it's just to share some of, one of the things I do definitely find is that when clients come to us and businesses come to us, they've lost the love for recruiting. It's just a massive headache. And
it's just a job, isn't it?
It's awful.
It's another task.
It's just another task. It's like another inbox that they have to manage. It's just painful and it doesn't work out. If that's happening, stop, because it's about people and it's about first impressions. And if you're not loving it, the other person on the other side will say that you're not loving it, and it is all about courting and bringing people in. So
I was just thinking there when you've said that, it is about getting the right person to take the responsibility in the business. If it's a small business that have got 10, 20, 30 employees, it's not that there's a HR person there to do it. So who is going to take that lead role, isn't it? And it's got to be someone involved in the business, hasn't it? That love it, engage it, but also live and breathe the business, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So they can put the business out there in the best aspect as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It needs to, because I think sometimes if you have dabblers, so people who are there's 3 or 4 people just having a look at an inbox, it doesn't work either, because from a candidate journey perspective, there's no consistency there. No one knows what you've done. And also, if you just suddenly decide to stop a role because you're just going to take what you've got coming, that's already come in applications wise, then you start making the wrong hires. It becomes a little bit messy.
Yeah.
And I suppose recruitment, the process is just like anything else. It needs to start, a middle and an end. It needs to be taken through, and it needs to be done now more than ever in the best way possible, so that you do get that person who's going to come and stay with you.
Yeah, and it's that consistency of approach, isn't
Always about consistent reconfirming, talking again about what's important to you as a business, all those things time and time again. So when people come through those doors, their eyes are wide and they know exactly what they're coming into, and their hearts are in it.
Yeah, straight away. I think that's great. So we obviously been listening to you today. So where can listeners find out more about you and about Talentheads?
Excellent. Well, they can look at our website. So it's www.talentheads.co.uk, and we are big on social. So like you say, we quite like our TikToks and stuff.
Cool and funky.
Well, I can definitely say it's not me that creates it. So Camille, massive shout out if you're listening to this. Camille does our graduate. You see, new ideas, embrace it. But
actually, I met her the other day and she is great.
She's fab. She had sparkly boots on. She's fabulous.
Long sparkly boots. There was an occasion for that, obviously. Not just randomly wearing them. But kind of upon first meeting somebody, she's got something about her, hasn't she? She's got that flair, she's got the ability, and she's got the drive to want to do something. And she's invested in your business.
She believes in it.
Yeah.
She absolutely believes in
perfect,
it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So you could follow her or us on any of our channels. So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on TikTok. So you can follow us on there, or you can just give myself a shout. Should I just say my email address, Louise? It's sam@talentheads.co.uk.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for listening to the Real World HR podcast, and thank you so much to Sam for joining us today. You can find out more information about the things that we've discussed in this episode in the show notes. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks very much, Sam.
Thank you.